Close your eyes and step out into a night that bites. The air doesn't just chill. It presses its teeth against your cheeks, testing for weakness. The sky is a low lid of iron. Snow turns sound into a hush so complete you can hear your own breath turning to frost. You are standing on the edge of a world that will not forgive a mistake. Tonight the cold is hunting you. Look around. Not a forest of comfort, not a cozy postcard. This is steppe tundra, a vast skin of pale grass stitched with thin snow, the land stretched tight until it thrums in the wind. A line of dark pines clings to a ridge like survivors who refuse to fall. Beyond them the glacier rises, blue-white, faceted, ancient. Its face is a wall of time, its crevasses black like sleeping mouths. The wind skims over it and falls onto the plain with a steady, predatory moan. It carries ice the way a cat carries claws, quiet until it isn't. This is not a season. It is an opponent. And the first rule is simple. Do not stand still. Your breath steams, a ghost that flees from you. Underfoot the ground is iron-hard. Even the snow is stingy, a thin powder scoured into drifts by a wind that never tires. Far away a herd moves. Reindeer, their backs dusted white, their heads low to graze the scant blades exposed by the wind. Every step they take writes the law of this land. Move or die. Somewhere a wolf tests its song against the cold and gets no answer except silence. That silence is what you live inside. It is the silence of sleeping streams, of buried roots, of all the soft things locked away until the sun remembers them. You pull your furs tighter. They're stitched from lives taken in warmer days. Deer, wolf, fox. Each hair a tiny wall against the night. Your fingers learn to count heat like a miser counts coins, a little at a time, never wasted. Your steps crunch and whisper. Above, the thin sun has already fallen below the teeth of the western hills. Night arrives not as a curtain but as a weight. Here winter is not merely cold. It is a schedule that ignores you. Days shrink into slivers that cannot hold all the work that must be done. Wood is scarce. Even the dwarfed willows hide under snow. Bone will burn. Dung will smolder. Anything that will hold a coal is treasure. The fire isn't romance. It is a ledger, fuel in, life out. Let the flames die by accident, and the cold will write your name. Look closely at your companions. 12 souls, maybe fewer. Faces seamed by wind, eyes narrow against the glare, movement quiet as thought. Words are saved for need. The air steals them too quickly. You move as a single animal made of many bodies. A child rides swaddled against a mother's chest. An old man lags slightly but doesn't ask for mercy. He shaped the flint you carry. At his belt hangs a stick of pyrite wrapped in hide, the promise of future fire. This band is not a list of names. It is an engine. 1 part hunts, 1 part mends, 1 part teaches, 1 part remembers. Take 1 part away and the engine coughs. Take 2 and it stops. A hill's shoulder breaks the wind just enough to matter. You pause there, bodies forming a crescent against the gusts. In the near distance, a dark smudge interrupts the pale. An overhang of rock you know from winters past. There's no softness in it, only less danger. That is the measure here. Not comfort versus discomfort, but danger versus less. The thought steadies you. Survival isn't a hero's speech. It's a sequence. Eyes watch sky, hands protect heat, feet keep moving. Mouth spends few words, listen. The ice talks, not loudly, but you can hear it if you hold your breath. A groan from the glacier's belly, a settling crack somewhere beneath the ancient snow. The land is not still. It is merely patient. Its patience is the trap. If you think it sleeps, you will. A ripple passes through the reindeer herd. Heads up, ears pricked, bodies angled to the wind. For a heartbeat, you imagine a hunt, the arc of a spear, the thump of impact, the hot breath of a dying animal making fog against the night. That thought is warmth you can taste, but it is a trap too. Night erases distance and multiplies risks. A broken leg is a sentence. A lost child is a wound that never closes. Hunger sharpens your teeth, but winter sharpens its knives faster. You let the herd go. Not now, not here. Your patience answers the land's patience, and for the moment you win. The sky darkens into something that feels older than color. Stars gather like frost on black stone. The band reaches the overhang. It is as you left it. Wind-shadowed, empty, wide enough for a dozen bodies and a small fire if the smoke has somewhere to run. The first hands clear the snow. The second hands lay down grass saved from autumn, brittle but still useful. The third hand stacks stones into a ring. The fourth hands cradle tinder like a sleeping ember. Perit and flint meet. Sparks hop like brief insects and die. Again, again. A curl of smoke answers, thin, shy. Someone cups it, breathes a wordless prayer made of air. The ember reddens. Dry willow twigs accept the gift. The first flame stutters, catches, wavers, and then chooses to live. In the glow, faces appear out of the dark, as if painted onto the night. Every wrinkle has a purpose. Every scar tells a map. Where the river trapped you, where the ice bit, where antler met bone. Hands move without waste. First strip of meat, tough from smoke, softens near the heat. It will not be good, but it will be enough. A child holds a stick in the firelight, watches sparks climb into the night and vanish, as if they hit a ceiling and went no further. Lessons are not speeches here. They are repetitions done in a circle, until they become memory in the muscles. Beyond the circle of light, the world presses its face to the doorway and breathes. You can feel it, the cold, patient and tireless. It has all the time in the world and you have only tonight. But you have something it doesn't. Each other, a kind of heat that cannot be measured by coals. The old man nods at the child and shows how to shield flame with a curved palm not too close. The mother checks the hide wraps at the cave's mouth where the wind sneaks in. The hunter tests the spear shaft for a hairline crack that would turn luck into loss. Every gesture says the same thing. We will be here when the sun returns because we did not wait for it to save us. Do not be fooled by quiet. Survival is loud with decisions you make silently. It's there when you choose to ration a mouthful, to carry one more armful of scrub, to turn your back on a tempting shadow because your heartbeat warned you it was wrong. It's in the way you sit. Close enough to share heat, far enough to let everyone's fur breathe so condensation doesn't freeze. It's in the way you sleep. Shifts that overlap so no hour belongs to darkness alone. Outside, frost grows feathers on stone. The glacier's edge takes starlight and returns it as a rumor. Somewhere snow gives way and slides a little, the land exhaling. The fire answers with a pop, a brief spark that arcs and dies. You watch it and you remember the second rule. Never trust ease. Fire thrives now. That is when it is most likely to fail. You feed it bone, you shift the coals, you bank them so morning will not begin with Flint's stubborn silence. The night leans closer, listening for you to falter. You don't, not tonight. Your band breathes together, a single lung stitched from many bodies. Tomorrow will ask for other kinds of courage, movement, pursuit, the long arithmetic of hunger and distance. But tonight's law is simpler and harsher. Keep the heat, keep the watch, keep the will. This is the world of ice. It is not waiting for you to leave. It expects you to disappear, but you are still here. That is your hook, your defiance, your first victory. Keep moving. Keep thinking. Keep the flame. The cold is hunting, but it is not the only hunter on this plain. The wind does not forgive walls of hide that sag or bone frames lashed in haste. Every gap, every flaw is a handhold for death. Shelter in the Ice Age is not luxury. It is a weapon sharpened against cold, hunger, and fear. Step into a cave. The word suggests comfort, but the reality is harsher. A cave is not warm. It is a throat cut into stone, exhaling damp air that chills skin to the marrow. The smell is layered. Smoke stains from fires long gone, the musk of animals that claimed the space before you, the damp mineral breath of rock itself. Water drips in rhythms older than speech. You are not alone. Owls, bats, foxes, even bears have known this space before you did. Every entrance is a question. Is it safer inside than out? Yet caves were chosen again and again. Why? Because they offered what the plain refused, stillness. The wind could not chase you here, and walls of stone gave a kind of promise. They blocked the horizon where predators prowled. They allowed fire to cling to one spot. Caves were not homes in the modern sense. They were footholds, pauses carved out of a world that never paused. But caves were not always there, and not always enough. The open steppe demanded invention. Picture mammoth bones rising into the air, a ribcage taller than a man, tusks arched like white scythes driven into the earth, hides stretched across the frame, sewn with sinew into a drumskin wall. This was not metaphor. It was architecture built from giants. Archaeologists at Dolní Věstonice uncovered rings of bones stacked like bricks, the remnants of homes where fire once glowed. Imagine the sound. Wind screaming outside, muted to a hum inside where meat smoked and children slept. These huts were more than protection. They were declarations. To build a house from a mammoth was to claim power over a beast 10 tons heavy and strong enough to crush a line of hunters. Each bone in the wall said, "We outlasted you, we repurposed your body into our survival." Even death was harvested, turned into rafters and ribs of a house that stood against winter's teeth. The ingenuity extended beyond bones. Where mammoths did not fall, other shelters rose. Lean-tos of branches buried in snow, pits dug into permafrost lined with hides, domes shaped from turf and sod. A band could vanish into the landscape, their shelters camouflaged by the very materials that tried to kill them. Grass became rope, dung became mortar, snow itself became a wall if cut and stacked right. Nothing was waste. Everything was design. Consider the work. Hides scraped and softened, sewn into sheets large enough to roof a family. Needles carved from bone, eyes drilled with patience, thread spun from sinew. A stitch was not art but survival. A loose seam meant a draft. A draft meant frostbite. Every seamstress was an engineer, every hand a guarantor of tomorrow. Inside these shelters, light was a scarce guest. Fire lit the space unevenly, its glow flickering across bones and hides, its smoke staining ceilings black. Shadows leapt like animals against the walls. Heat rose only as far as the low roof would allow, and so bands huddled close to the ground, their breath weaving into a single fog. Children pressed against parents, bodies layered like clothing. Privacy was not a concept. Life pressed together because cold demanded it. Think of the soundscape. Wind reduced to a muffled growl, wood popping in the flames, the occasional rattle of bone in the frame. Beyond that, silence so heavy you could hear the snow shift outside. Inside was not comfort, but it was less danger, and that was enough. Yet even inside, vigilance ruled. The fire had to be fed. Ventilation had to be checked. Too little and smoke suffocated. Too much, and heat bled into the night. The hides stretched tight had to be inspected, scraped of frost that accumulated like teeth biting inward. Children had to be kept away from flames, yet close enough to share warmth. It was balance upon balance, every hour a negotiation with forces stronger than flesh. Still, there was a kind of pride here. Imagine sitting within a ring of mammoth bones, hearing the blizzard beat against your walls, and knowing it cannot touch you tonight. Imagine the glow of fire reflected off tusks, the trophies of survival turned into the very architecture of endurance. These huts and caves were not just shelters, they were symbols that humans refused to bow to nature's script. They rewrote it. Archaeological evidence whispers these truths. At La Ferracie in France, caves reveal traces of fire pits, flint flakes, and bones arranged with purpose. At Mezhirik in Ukraine, circles of mammoth bones mark the outlines of dwellings built with intelligence and care. These are not accidents of stone and bone. They are the blueprints of stubbornness, the first architectural declarations that survival would not be left to chance. Each shelter tells a story of adaptation. A cave mouth darkened with soot speaks of seasons returned to the same place, memories layered like smoke. A bone hut collapsed into earth speaks of journeys onward, a temporary stronghold left to rot as the herd moved. Snow walls melting into spring speak of decisions made fast, of bands that knew when to stay and when to flee. Every stone arranged, every bone placed, every hide stitched is evidence of one truth. Humans did not simply endure the Ice Age, they engineered their defiance. Shelter was not about rest. It was about defying an enemy that surrounded them on every side, and so, in caves damp with echoes and huts stitched from giants, people wrote their survival in the language of stone, bone, and fire. Outside, the night continued its hunt, but inside, a small victory was claimed again and again. The cold pressed close, but it never crossed the threshold. The Ice Age had many enemies, fangs, hunger, storms, but one stood above them all, the cold. Against that relentless killer, humans forged a single weapon that turned darkness into defiance. Fire was not warmth, it was life itself. Without it, every night was a gamble against extinction. Picture the ritual. Flint in one hand, pyrite in the other. The hunter kneels, shoulders hunched, eyes narrowed in concentration. A spark leaps, vanishes, another, and another. The motion repeats, steady as heartbeat, until a sliver of smoke curls upward. Everyone leans in. No one speaks. A spark is more valuable than words. If it catches, the band has a tomorrow. If it dies, they walk the edge of death tonight. The ember lives. A twist of grass accepts it, cradled like an infant. A breath, not too much, not too little. It glows, it reddens, it spreads. A flame blossoms. The silence breaks, not with cheers but with the collective exhale of lungs holding fear too long. Fire has returned, and with it the tribe's heartbeat. Fire is more than heat. It is weapon, kitchen, and guardian all in one. Flames turned raw meat into nourishment, made marrow soft enough to draw out, smoke-cured strips of food that would last through lean weeks. Fire gave bones a second use, cracked open, boiled, turned into broth that strengthened limbs and spirits. With it, hunters were not slaves to fresh kills alone. They became managers of time, able to store energy against famine, but its power ran deeper. Fire bent predators to human will. Wolves and cave lions stalked the night, but they knew the language of flame. Red light that flickered like threat, smoke that clawed the throat, heat that bit back. A ring of fire was a wall no beast dared test. Even shadows obeyed it, retreating to the edges where human eyes could catch them first. The night no longer belonged entirely to the cold and its hunters. Fire drew a boundary where humans ruled. Fuel, however, was never guaranteed. The tundra offered little wood, and what it did give was twisted and stunted. Bands burned willow twigs, scrub pine, even dried grass knotted together. Where wood failed, bone became fuel. Imagine mammoth ribs and reindeer antlers, stacked not as weapons or tools but as kindling. Burned bone hissed and smoked, its flames weaker but still precious. Dung, too, was gathered, dried and burned. It did not matter if it smoked bitter. If it gave heat, it was worth the breath it stole. Nothing was waste in the Ice Age economy of survival. Fires had to be tended with vigilance, bordering on obsession. A flame could not be trusted to last through the night without care. Children learned early to guard embers, to cover them with ash that insulated their heat until dawn. To wake and find the fire dead was a terror equal to any predator. Restarting it in the teeth of a blizzard, fingers numbed and hides stiff, was a trial that many did not survive. So coals were carried forward, transported in hollowed bones or clay bowls packed with ash, glowing seeds of survival that traveled wherever the tribe did. The hearth became the band's anchor. Around it work was divided, one sewing, one sharpening, one telling the day's lesson. Stories grew in the glow, shadows dancing like spirits on the walls. Fire was not only physical, it was psychological. It gave rhythm to the unbroken dark, drew boundaries where fear retreated, lit faces so children could see the maps of survival etched into elders' skin. Knowledge passed in the warmth. Which plant root fought hunger? Which track belonged to lion or bear? Which star promised spring? Memory was fire's companion, both flickering yet persistent if fed. Archaeological echoes confirm this. At Terra Amata in France, hearths scarred the ground, circles of ash repeating layer upon layer, evidence of fires remade in the same place over generations. At Kostyonki in Russia, burnt bones testify to nights when wood was absent, but determination was not. Fire pits are found again and again, their blackened stones the fingerprints of humanity's oldest partnership. But fire was never mere utility. It inspired awe. Sparks struck from stone seemed born from magic, light conjured from rock itself. Some bands may have seen flame as a living thing, a spirit to be courted, never taken for granted. Its dance hypnotized. Its crackle spoke in riddles, its smoke rose toward the heavens, as if carrying words unspoken. Around the hearth songs and myths grew, each flame a line of poetry written against the dark. There is danger here too. Fire consumes as well as protects. Hides too close to the hearth smoldered. Shelters built with bone and grass could ignite in seconds. Smoke killed as silently as cold if air was poorly managed. Children could stumble into coals. Hunters could misjudge and set entire caches aflame. Respect was law fire gave, but it also demanded. Still, no risk outweighed its gift. With fire, the Ice Age became survivable, not merely endured. Without it, humanity would have remained prey, huddled, fragile, destined to fade like so many beasts already swallowed by the glaciers. With fire, humans stood apart. They extended the day, mastered the night, and turned the enemy of cold into something beaten back, at least within the ring of flame. Picture that circle now. Outside, the wind lashes the plain, endless and merciless. Predators prowl the edge of vision. Frost clings to bone huts and cave mouths, trying to seep inside. But within the glow, faces are lit in gold and red. A child's laughter rises for a moment, cut short by a mother's hush but not erased. Hands extend to the warmth, palms catching heat as if catching blessings. Meat hisses on stones. Sparks climb into the sky, vanish, and are replaced by more. The fire endures because hands feed it, because patience sustains it, because will refuses to let it die. Fire is the heart of survival. Every flame lit in that age is an ancestor of the one you strike today with a match. The story it tells is not comfort. It is defiance, ingenuity, vigilance. To sit in the fire's circle was to belong to tomorrow, and in the Ice Age, tomorrow was never guaranteed. Hunger was the other predator of the Ice Age. It stalked silently, patient and merciless. A man could fight wolves, a woman could mend hides, but hunger never stopped, never slept. And to fight it, bands of humans hunted not rabbits or fish alone, but giants. Imagine the sight. A mammoth herd moving across the steppe, each beast taller than a hut, tusks gleaming like curved swords of ivory. The ground itself shakes beneath their feet. Their breath rises in white plumes that drift like smoke signals. To a hungry band, this is not majesty. It is survival written in flesh and fat. But to take one down is to gamble everything. Hunting giants was never an act of one hunter's bravery. It was a choreography, a discipline. Spears were not thrown wildly. They were aimed with precision, sometimes tipped with fire-hardened wood, sometimes with flint so sharp it could slice bone. Atlatls, spear throwers, extended human strength, letting a hunter's arm strike with the reach of a predator's claw. To stand against 10 tons of fury, one arm was not enough. But 20, 30 in concert? That was strategy turned into survival. Picture the tactic. A herd driven toward a cliff edge, hunters shouting, waving fire, forming barriers with noise and movement. The mammoths sense the trap, but panic spreads through their ranks. One misstep, one stumble, and a giant falls. The ground shakes, tusks strike stone, and a body heavier than houses collapses. For the hunters, the danger is not over. It has only begun. A wounded mammoth is rage embodied. It can swing tusks like scythes, crush bone beneath its weight, scatter hunters like twigs. To kill it is to risk everything, and many bands paid the price in blood and broken bodies. But when the kill was won, the reward was beyond measure. A single mammoth could feed dozens for weeks. Its fat provided calories that no root or berry could match. Its hide could roof shelters. Its bones could serve as tools, weapons, even fuel for fire. Nothing went to waste. Success against a giant was not just a meal, it was a foundation for life itself. Other hunts demanded different strategies. Reindeer herds migrated in rivers of muscle across the plains. Hunters learned to read their movements, to predict crossings at valleys or rivers, to wait in ambush. Bison, heavy and strong, were driven into swamps where their hooves sank, or into narrow ravines where spears rained from above. Horses, too, were hunted, herded into natural traps, their speed betrayed by terrain chosen carefully. Archaeological sites speak the truth of these battles. At Solutré in France, layers upon layers of horse bones tell of repeated hunts, where entire herds were driven into killing grounds. At Kostenki, Russia, mammoth kill sites reveal circles of bones arranged where feasts turned into survival caches. Each site is not only bones and tools, it is evidence of strategy, of collective will, of defiance against beasts far stronger than flesh and blood humans. Hunting was not always victory. Failure was constant, and its cost was measured in empty stomachs and wasted strength. A missed throw meant a wasted spear tip, a treasure not easily replaced. A stampede could trample hunters before they reached safety. A chase too long could burn more calories than it earned. Every decision was a wager against hunger. Every step in pursuit balanced on the edge of ruin. Yet necessity sharpened minds. Hunters learned to track by shadows in snow, by broken grass, by the faint smell of musk on the wind. They studied herds, watching how mothers shielded calves, how bulls turned to fight, how seasons changed migration. Patience became weapon as much as flint and spear. The hunt was not only physical, it was intellectual, the birth of strategy that made humans more than prey. The danger did not end with the kill. The smell of blood spread across the wind, a beacon for wolves, lions, and scavengers. Hunters had to guard their prize fiercely, forming rings of spears around carcasses, while fires smoked and meat was stripped. A mammoth's death could draw predators from miles away. Victory in the hunt was only half the battle. The rest was defending it through the long night. But in the circle of light, when meat roasted and bones cracked for marrow, triumph tasted real. Children gnawed on ribs bigger than their bodies. Hunters licked grease from their fingers. firelight painting their faces in gold. For one night, hunger was not the master. For one night, humans dined like kings of the Ice Age. And in those moments they believed they were not merely surviving, they were conquering. The memory of these hunts carried forward in stories. Around the fire, elders told of the mammoth that nearly crushed a hunter before it fell, of the reindeer that leapt a gorge only to be speared mid-air, of the bison that raged even with spears bristling from its hide. These were not just tales. They were blueprints for the next hunt, lessons dressed as legends. In the Ice Age, myth and manual were the same thing. To hunt a giant was to claim a place in a world that wanted you gone. Every throw of a spear, every chase across frozen ground, every risk taken against impossible odds said the same thing. We will not bow. And so, with courage, strategy, and desperation, humans carved survival from the flesh of titans. Outside the fire's glow, the herds still move. Their hooves drum the frozen earth. Their shadows stretch long in the moonlight. Hunger still waits. But with sharpened flint, with patience, with courage, the hunters prepare again. Because in this world, victory is temporary, but the will to hunt never ends. Hunting giants brought triumph, but no band could rely on mammoths alone. The herds moved, the traps failed, the spears sometimes missed. Hunger was not patient. It clawed at the belly every day. And so survival required another skill just as vital as courage, the art of gathering and storing. Outsmarting hunger meant learning how to trick time itself. Walk into summer on the Ice Age steppe. The land, usually grey and bleak, bursts into a brief riot of green. Grasses sway, shrubs bud, berries ripen under a fleeting sun. Families scatter to harvest. Children's hands stain red from berries. Women dig roots with sharpened sticks. Men climb slopes for nuts hidden in tough shells. Every morsel is not just food. It is insurance, fuel for a future storm. Roots like cattail, bulbs of wild onion, and starchy tubers are unearthed and piled. These are humble compared to mammoth haunches, but their calories last. Seeds and grains, though small, can be collected in pouches, dried and hidden in storage pits, dug deep into the permafrost. Hunger may stalk, but humans learn to hide from it, leaving caches that the cold itself guards until the right time. Picture a pit lined with stones and hides, filled with dried meat, nuts, and frozen marrow. Covered with soil and snow, it becomes invisible to all but those who dug it. Months later, when snow blinds the plain and prey is scarce, the band returns. They dig through the crust, pull away stones, and find treasures waiting. Food that has not spoiled, calories preserved by frost. In a world where famine is the rule, this is genius. Using the enemy's weapon, the cold, to outlast the enemy itself. Smoking was another invention. Fires built low and smoldering turned strips of meat into leathery stores that resisted rot. The smell lingered on hides, on hair, in caves for weeks. Bands carried bundles of smoked reindeer or bison across migrations, chewing pieces on the move. What could not be eaten fresh was transformed into food that traveled. Hunger was clever, but so were the hands that made smoke into preservation. Every gatherer knew the landscape like a map carved into memory. Where berries ripened in the shadow of hills, where nut trees clung to valleys, where medicinal plants waited beneath snow. Nothing was random. Every step carried knowledge passed from mother to daughter, from elder to child. Survival was not only the hunt's adrenaline, it was the quiet wisdom of knowing when and where food appeared. But danger lingered here too. Some roots killed as surely as wolves. Some berries poisoned blood faster than frost. A single mistake in identification could cripple a band. This is why gathering was as much science as instinct, why stories around the fire often taught not only glory in the hunt, but caution in the harvest. A misjudged plant was not a lesson. It was a funeral. Storage itself was an act of defiance. To set aside food meant to say, tomorrow exists. In a world where every sunrise was a gift, that thought was revolutionary. But with it came new challenges. Stored food drew scavengers. Foxes, wolves, even bears could smell a cache from afar. Guards were posted, fires burned near, and caches were placed where cliffs or rivers offered natural defense. The act of saving food became another battle in the endless war with the wild. Archaeological whispers confirm this ingenuity. At Dolní Věstonice, pits filled with mammoth bones and stored marrow speak of caches carefully planned. At Kostenki, traces of dried fish and seeds reveal strategies beyond the hunt. Humans were not merely reacting to famine. They were engineering solutions, bending time so that food lasted beyond its season. And there was rhythm in this work. Summer was a frenzy of gathering, autumn a rush to dry and store, winter the test of whether preparations were enough. Spring was not rebirth but relief, a chance to renew supplies before hunger closed in again. The cycle repeated, each year a test, each test a lesson. Those who learned survived. Those who didn't were erased, their fires gone, their bones scattered. The hunger did not only stalk the body, it haunted the mind. Nights in deep winter, when the pit was half empty and the herds too far, fear sat beside every fire. Stories told of lean years when bands starved, when children were fed before elders, when caches were raided by rival groups. These memories sharpened resolve. Every handful of berries gathered in summer carried the weight of winter's shadow. Yet ingenuity turned fear into strategy. Where animals moved, humans adapted. They learned to dry fish by rivers, to ferment plants in pits, to use snow as a freezer. They became architects of storage, inventors of preservation, masters of turning a short season of abundance into months of survival. Picture the scene. A child bites into a berry long since dried, its sweetness faint but real. A mother unwraps smoked meat that still carries the scent of fire from months ago. An elder cracks a frozen marrow bone, sucking out fat that tastes like defiance. In these acts, hunger is not defeated, but it is delayed, denied, tricked. And every day it is denied is another day claimed for life. Gathering and storing were not glamorous. They lacked the thrill of mammoth hunts, the fire of legend. But they were the spine of survival. Without them, even the greatest hunter's spear would end in famine. Together they made humanity not just hunters of beasts, but managers of time. Hunger was clever, but humans were cleverer. And in that balance, survival tilted just enough to let tomorrow come. The Ice Age was not kind to skin. Bare flesh froze in minutes. Breath turned to ice on lips, fingers blackened if left unprotected. To survive, humans needed more than fire and shelter. They needed armor, clothing stitched from the hides of the very beasts they hunted. Every stitch, every layer was a shield against death. Picture the work. A hunter drags a reindeer hide into camp. The skin is scraped clean with flint blades, every scrap of flesh removed so it won't rot. The hide is stretched taut on wooden stakes, drying under a weak sun. Hours later, a woman softens it with fat and smoke, kneading until the stiff sheet becomes pliable. This is not fashion. It is survival turned into fabric. Needles carved from bone are the silent heroes here. Archaeologists find them, delicate yet strong, some drilled with eyes finer than a hair. Through them, sinew threads pulled tight, joining hide to hide. Sewing was invention as important as fire itself. A cloak made from one pelt might keep the chill for an hour, but clothing stitched into layers, fur against skin, hide against fur, could hold back the cold for a season. The outfits grew into systems. Reindeer fur, dense and insulating, became inner coats. Mammoth hide, heavy and thick, was used for outer layers. Boots were lined with grass or moss, insulation stuffed between hide and sole. Gloves stitched from fox fur wrapped fingers in soft traps of warmth. Even hats existed, simple bands of hide tied under the chin, keeping heat from fleeing through the head. Ötzi the Iceman, though thousands of years younger, tells part of this story. Found frozen in the Alps, his body was wrapped in stitched leather, grass-stuffed boots and a fur cloak. If he dressed this way, his Ice Age ancestors dressed with no less care. Each garment was not just protection, but proof of human ingenuity sharpened by necessity. But clothing was more than insulation. It was mobility. Fire warmed the cave, but hunts and migrations demanded steps taken under open sky. To follow reindeer herds, to track mammoths across plains, humans needed to walk, run, climb, even in winds that burned lungs. Clothes turned distance into possibility. Without them, migration would be suicide. With them, the tundra became traversable. Think of the detail. Stitching so tight it trapped air, seams sealed with fat to keep water out, cloaks designed to shed snow like animal fur. These were not crude wraps. They were tailored defenses, adjusted for each body, each season. A child's coat smaller but layered double, an elder's heavier with padding, a hunter's lighter for speed but reinforced at knees and elbows. Decorations mattered too. Beads of ivory, shells, even colored stones were sewn into garments, not as wasteful luxury but as markers, symbols of identity, of clan, of memory. A cloak decorated with teeth was a map of hunts survived, victories worn into the fabric of survival. Clothing was not only shield, it was story insulation extended to the home. Beds of grass and moss layered beneath hides made sleeping less of a gamble. Cloaks doubled as blankets. Spare hides were hung across cave mouths to block drafts. Even snow itself, packed against walls, became insulation. Every barrier was another heartbeat stolen from the cold, yet danger always lingered. Wet hides froze stiff, turning flexible armor into brittle slabs. Fires too close scorched fur ruined weeks of work. Children grew fast, outgrowing clothes before a season ended, forcing new garments to be made constantly. Clothing was not permanent. It was a cycle, a never-ending labor. Hands always scraped, sewed, softened, repaired. Without that rhythm, a band unraveled faster than thread. Archaeology whispers of these truths. In Siberian burials, bodies were found adorned with beads sewn into patterns, evidence of garments long decayed. In caves, bone needles lie in layers of ash, tools of hands now dust. Even the famous Sunghir burials, with thousands of beads sewn onto clothing, speak of humans who knew clothing as both function and identity. Each stitch was survival disguised as art. Consider the scene. A mother threads sinew through bone, repairing a tear while her child sleeps under a cloak of fox fur. A hunter tests new boots, stamping snow to ensure no seam leaks. An elder shows a teenager how to split sinew into thinner threads, his fingers sure despite the cold. Around them, firelight flickers on garments patched and repatched, each repair proof that tomorrow is still possible. The cold never relented. Wind still clawed, frost still reached, but clothing gave resistance. A hunter could walk miles across tundra and return alive. A child could step outside to gather wood and not die before the fire was reached again. Hides, fur, sinew, bone. These humble things stitched humanity's defiance into every fiber. To dress in the Ice Age was to declare war on the elements. It was to wear the memory of hunts, the patience of hands, the stubbornness of survival. Each coat, each boot, each glove said the same thing. You may kill us if we falter, but you will not take us without a fight. And so, wrapped in fur and hide, humans stood against the wind. They did not defeat the cold, but they outlasted it, one stitch at a time. Alone, the Ice Age was a death sentence. One pair of hands could not hunt, gather, sew, guard, and keep the fire alive all at once. One voice could not sing away the silence or watch every shadow. Survival was never the story of the solitary hero. It was the story of the band, the small circle of humans who stood together against a world that wanted them gone. Picture a group of perhaps 15 souls. A mother with a baby strapped to her chest, 2 teenagers learning the hunt, hungry for approval, an old man whose knees ache, but whose memory is a map of rivers and trails, women sewing hides, men sharpening flint, children chasing each other in the brief daylight. Every role mattered. Everybody carried a piece of the survival engine. Food was shared, not hoarded. A reindeer brought down by a hunter was not his prize alone, it was the tribe's. Fat and marrow fed children first, then elders, then everyone else. This was not charity. It was arithmetic. Children meant the future. Elders meant knowledge. Without either, the group collapsed. Sharing was not kindness. It was strategy. The only way to outlast hunger's endless hunt. Tasks were divided with the same logic. Some tracked game, their eyes trained to read snow as if it were parchment. Others crafted tools, napping flint into blades sharp enough to shave hair. Some sewed clothing, others fetched fuel, others taught. Everyone contributed, even children. A child might gather twigs or keep embers glowing. Even the smallest act rippled outward, adding a stitch to the fabric of survival. And always there was teaching. The Ice Age did not wait for slow learners. Skills had to be passed quickly, efficiently. Around the fire, elders showed how to strike sparks, how to knot sinew, how to shape a spear shaft so it flew true. Mistakes were corrected with urgency. Knowledge was not written on stone or hide. It lived in voices, in repetition, in memory etched into muscle and bone. Cooperation extended beyond the practical. Around firelight, stories and songs bound the group together. Tales of past hunts, of ancestors, of spirits in the ice gave meaning to the endless cold. Laughter cracked the silence, a weapon as sharp as flint against despair. Rituals, whether songs, dances, or painted hands on cave walls, turned survival into more than endurance. They reminded the band why life was worth the struggle. Archaeology gives us glimpses of this truth. At Sunghir in Russia, 2 children were buried side by side, their clothing adorned with thousands of beads, each bead carved and sewn by patient hands. That care tells us something profound. These children mattered not only in life but in death. They belonged to a group that mourned them, honored them, remembered them. Such acts are not luxuries of comfort. They are proofs of connection, of cooperation stronger than hunger. Strength in numbers meant more than food and labor. It meant defense. A lone hunter faced a lion with fear. A band faced it with spears in a circle, courage multiplied by many. Predators thought twice when eyes and weapons glittered in unison. Even the elements were resisted better together. Bodies pressed in a circle at night shared warmth, breaths mingling into a cloud that insulated the group. But cooperation had its frictions. Scarcity bred conflict. A winter too long, a cache too small, a hunt that failed. These tested bonds. Disputes flared over food, over leadership, over direction of travel. Yet bands that survived found ways to resolve them, often through elders' counsel or rituals that restored balance. Because to fracture was to die. The Ice Age punished division more harshly than any quarrel. Even migration, the endless walk to follow herds and seasons, was made possible only by numbers. Children slowed the pace, elders stumbled, yet the group adjusted. No one was left behind lightly, because each person carried value, whether in strength, knowledge, or the simple act of adding warmth to the circle at night. To abandon was a wound to the band's strength, and wounds risked death. Cooperation also shaped identity. You were not simply a human. You were our human, part of this band. Loyalty was survival. Betrayal was unthinkable because it equaled suicide. To take more than your share, to hoard fire, to withhold effort, these were crimes punished not with prisons but with exile. And exile was a death sentence colder than any blizzard. Imagine the scene, a circle of people, faces lit by fire, meat roasting on stones. Laughter erupts when a child repeats a story badly, exaggerating until even the stern elder chuckles. The fire crackles, sparks rising into night. For a moment, the world outside, the howling wind, the predators, the hunger, disappears. In that circle there is warmth greater than fire, strength greater than spears. It is the strength of togetherness, the refusal to face the Ice Age alone. Cave walls record this too. At Chauvet, painted horses and lions gallop across stone, not drawn for utility but for memory, for teaching, for unity. The paintings are not of individuals, they are of herds, groups, bands. Humans understood that they too were strongest as a herd. The lesson is simple, but it echoes louder than any mammoth's call. Alone you freeze, together you endure. The Ice Age shaped not only bodies and tools but bonds. It carved into humanity the truth that cooperation is not optional, it is destiny. In the end, survival was not the story of the strongest hunter or the cleverest gatherer. It was the story of the band, the small stubborn cluster of humans who chose to hold the line together against a world of predators, storms, and endless cold. They survived not because they were strongest, but because they were united. The Ice Age was not a world where anyone stood still. To stay in one place was to starve, to freeze, to fade into bones under the snow. The herds moved, the rivers froze, the seasons shifted like dice tossed by the wind. To survive, humans learned the hardest lesson. Life was a journey without pause. Picture a horizon that never ends. White plains stretching until they blur into the sky. Dark lines of reindeer moving in rivers across the land, antlers rising like forests on the march. Humans followed those rivers of flesh and bone, step after step, dragging sleds, carrying infants swaddled in hides, leading the old who leaned on sticks. Migration was not an adventure, it was law. To ignore it was to die. Every season dictated movement. Summer meant following reindeer into valleys where grass grew tall. Autumn meant hunting bison as they fattened before winter. Winter demanded retreat into caves or bone huts near rivers where fish could still be caught. Spring forced movement again, chasing thaw and the return of green shoots. The year was not a circle. It was a spiral of footsteps across endless ground. The journey itself was brutal. Imagine trudging through waist-deep snow, every step burning energy you could not spare. Imagine crossing frozen rivers that groaned beneath your weight, each crack a whisper of doom. Imagine carrying children, food, tools, fire itself, embers packed in dung or bone to be rekindled when the next camp was built. Every mile was a gamble against exhaustion, but movement was also opportunity. New valleys meant fresh resources. New rivers meant fish. New plains meant herds unspoiled by hunters. Migration was risk, but it was also renewal. Those who moved survived. Those who stayed behind left only bones and scattered tools for the earth to reclaim. Archaeology confirms this endless trek. Campsites scattered across Europe, Siberia, and the Americas reveal layers of human presence, each temporary, each abandoned for the next. At Kostenki, multiple levels of hearths speak of groups returning year after year, as if the land itself kept a calendar. At Beringia, footprints and tools trace humanity's push across frozen land bridges into new continents. The Ice Age was not static, it was movement turned into destiny. Travel was not chaos. It was planned, remembered, mapped without maps. Elders carried geography in their minds, which valleys flooded, which cliffs offered shelter where herds passed each year. Trails were stories told aloud until children could walk them without hesitation. Migration was as much memory as it was muscle, and yet it was dangerous. Bands could become lost in storms that erased landmarks, snow-buried paths, rivers swelled with sudden melts, herds veered in unexpected directions. Strangers were encountered, other bands, sometimes allies, sometimes rivals. Encounters could mean exchange of goods, mates, or knowledge, but they could also mean conflict, spears raised, food stolen. Movement carried not only survival, but risk of war. Still, the will to move was stronger than fear. Imagine the sight. Dozens of humans silhouetted against a glacier's glow, sleds creaking behind them, dogs barking, spears carried upright like banners. Children stumble but rise, elders pause but press forward. Behind them, the fire pits go cold, the shelters collapse into snow. Ahead of them, a new horizon waits. Tools of movement grew ingenious. Skins stretched over wooden frames became sleds to drag loads. Rafts built from logs carried families down thawed rivers. Snowshoes woven from branches and hide spread weight so feet would not sink. Every invention was a step forward, literally. Without these, migration would be slaughter by exhaustion. With them, the impossible became possible. Inside the band, migration forged unity. Every member knew their role. Hunters scouted ahead for danger. Gatherers checked rivers for edible plants. Mothers carried infants wrapped in hides against their skin. Elders advised on routes. No one walked empty-handed. The band itself was a caravan, an organism stretched across miles. Its heart beat steady with each trudging step, and migration left marks. Trails of broken spear shafts, dropped beads, abandoned shelters, all silent witnesses of humanity's march. Cave art too may tell of these journeys, lines of animals drawn in motion, humans chasing them across walls as if to record the eternal pursuit. Each painting whispers, "We moved, we followed, we endured." To stand still in the Ice Age was to betray the laws of survival. Hunger punished hesitation, and cold punished delay. Migration was not escape. It was offense, the act of meeting the future before it arrived. By moving, humans stayed ahead of starvation, ahead of predators, ahead of death itself. Picture nightfall on the trail. The band halts at a ridge. Hides are stretched for windbreaks. Fire coaxed from carried embers. Meat is roasted. Children huddle. Elders murmur stories. In the distance, the reindeer still move, their shadows long against the snow. The people will follow at dawn, not because they choose to, but because they must. Migration was not a burden alone, it was identity. To be human was to move, to refuse to be rooted in a world of shifting ice. That restlessness became survival, and survival became triumph. The bands that walked, that risked, that followed horizons, those were the bands that endured. The Ice Age was a test of movement. Those who stood still vanished. Those who walked became ancestors. And in every footstep across tundra, in every mile of frozen plain, humanity carved its defiance into the face of the world. The Ice Age never promised survival. Its winds froze rivers solid, its storms buried valleys in silence. Its predators prowled with teeth honed by hunger. And yet against every threat humanity endured. More than endured. They innovated, they adapted, they fought back with mind and hand. Their resilience was not an accident. It was the reason we are here. Picture the end of a brutal winter. A band emerges from a cave, their faces lined with exhaustion but their fire still burning. Behind them lie months of storms, nights of gnawing hunger, mornings when breath froze before leaving the lips. Yet here they stand alive. Each scar, each cracked hand, each stitched hide is proof of victory, not over the cold forever, but over the cold for now. That was enough. Resilience was not strength alone. It was ingenuity. When wood ran scarce, they burned bone. When cold pierced hides, they invented needles and thread. When hunger pressed harder than wolves, they learned to dry meat, to bury caches, to plan not just for today, but for tomorrow. Every obstacle became a challenge to outwit. Survival meant invention, and invention became identity. It was also cooperation. No single hunter could fell a mammoth or guard a camp alone. No mother could protect her child without the circle's support. No elder's wisdom mattered without young ears to carry it forward. The band's unity was resilience woven from many threads. To share food, to guard fire, to teach skill. These acts transformed fragile individuals into a community strong enough to defy the Ice Age. And beyond the practical, resilience lived in spirit. In the stories painted on cave walls, in the beads sewn onto garments, in the burials where the dead were honored with care. These acts did not feed the body, but they fed the will. They reminded each band that they were more than prey, more than wanderers. They were people, creators, survivors. Where lions left bones, humans left art. Where cold erased life, humans wrote memory. Archaeology testifies to this legacy. The Sunghir burials, with thousands of ivory beads painstakingly sewn into clothing, tell us of love, respect, and meaning carried into death. The cave paintings of Chauvet and Lascaux show not despair but vision, herds in motion, animals alive in color, human hands reaching across millennia. These were not luxuries. They were resilience made visible. In creating beauty amidst struggle, humans declared we are more than survival. We are memory, imagination, defiance. Even extinction itself could not erase resilience. Mammoths fell, cave lions vanished, even the great herds shifted and dwindled, but humans remained. Not because they were strongest in tooth or claw, but because they were strongest in will. They bent the environment to their needs, turning enemies into tools, obstacles into lessons. Legacy lives in us still. Every fire we strike today, every stitch in our clothing, every meal we store for tomorrow echoes the same ingenuity. The cold once stalked our ancestors, but we carry its defeat in our very bones. Their survival is our inheritance. Picture the closing image, a line of humans walking across the frozen plain, small against the vast horizon. Behind them, the glacier looms, patient and eternal. Ahead of them, a valley stretches where the sun glitters on thawing streams. They are tired, they are hungry, but they keep walking. Not because the land is gentle, it never was, but because their will is stronger than the cold. This is the legacy of the Ice Age, not that it nearly destroyed us, but that we refused to let it. Every spark struck into flame, every shelter raised, every stitch tightened, every hunt fought, every mile walked, all were acts of resilience. Together they formed a legacy not of fear but of triumph. And so the story ends not with extinction, but with survival. Not with silence, but with firelight. Not with defeat, but with a species that endured the harshest test the Earth could give. The Ice Age asked, "Will you vanish?" Humanity answered, "No, we will remain. Their resilience is our bloodline. Their legacy is our tomorrow."